All right. Good evening, everyone. We're ready to get started. Tonight, we're going to be learning Maseches Shabbos, Daf Kuf Lamed Zayin. Looks like a longer blot. It's actually fairly quick, and will bring us to the end of this parak, the end of parak Rabbi Eliezer Demila. Much as I enjoy this parak as a moel, we will be ending this parak and then moving on to the next parak tomorrow night, starting with a fresh parak with parak Tolim, the 20th parak of Maseches Shabbos. So right now we're starting a new Mishnah, and this Mishnah is about a little bit of confusion. It's a moel who was not on his game, and he got confused about which baby to circumcise first. This also could be applicable in a case of twins, where one baby was born before Shkia and one born after Shkia. The Mishnah doesn't really delineate. It's just two babies whose brisim should have been one day apart. Opens the Mishnah, top of Kuf Lamed Zayin, but Aleph, 6-7 lines down, as follows. Mishahaylo Shnei Tinokos, a moel has two babies with whom he needs to circumcise. Echad lamul, echad b'Shabbos. The first one needs to be circumcised on a Sunday, ve'echad lamul b'Shabbos, and one to circumcise on Shabbos. V'shachach, he made an error, he forgot. Umal es shel achar Shabbos b'Shabbos chayev. And he circumcised the baby who should have been circumcised on Sunday on Shabbos. So the halacha is your chayev. Seems pretty pashut because that's not a bris. You circumcised the baby a day early, that's a zero. That doesn't count at all. You could have had a mole removed. It would have had halachically the same significance. There's no difference at all. So then the Mishnah here writes it's your chayev. And now, let's change the case study. That was a case where the babies had to be circumcised Sunday and Shabbos. Here's a little different. Echad lamul be'erev Shabbos ve'echad lamul b'Shabbos. If there was a baby whose bris was supposed to be Friday, and a baby whose bris was supposed to be Shabbos, and then by accident, b'shachach umalas shel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, and the baby whose bris was supposed to be Friday, he accidentally circumcised him on Shabbos, so day 9, as it were. So that's a machlokas tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatos, Rabbi Yeshua poter. Machlokas in the tanaim whether or not you're chayev chatos.
Is there a problem for the baby later on?
That baby, no, because his bris was kosher. It was just done the isser. So the isser is on the milah, the isser is on the moel, but the bris is kosher. Yeah, that's a good question. But there's nothing to do. The reverse case, as we saw in the ratio of the Mishnah, that would be a big problem because the bris is not kosher. We would paskin in that case atafas down bris. But by the Friday baby who was circumcised on Shabbos, he's just a day late. No big deal.
Right, but so the first one that was...
He needs atafas down bris. But the second baby does not need anything. Because his bris should have been Friday. It was a day late. So the mole did a Mr. Doraisa, potentially. You see that there's a dissenting opinion. Rabbi Yeshua is of the opinion that it's patur. Mole. Ein shleach l'dvar ver. Ein shleach l'dvar ver. The father can't, I don't know where the parents were exactly. They were all checked out. So we don't know the logistics. And in the Gemara, in cases like this, we don't care about the logistics. All we know is that this baby was circumcised on the wrong day. The question was which way. And the ratio was Sunday circumcised on Shabbos, too early. And the Seifa was Friday circumcised on Shabbos, a day late. So that's in the ratio we saw no machlokas. And there everyone agreed that the baby who was a Sunday bris and he was circumcised on Shabbos, that there was Mr. Doraisa by the mole. And by the baby who was really a Friday bris, it was just late one day and it happened to be on Shabbos, machlokas tonight. Now, we're going to be learning 3 different versions of how this Mishnah should be understood. The text we have is only one way. So we're going to see 3 different versions. I'll try to keep things as clear as possible. It's not a difficult Gemara per se, but there's the cases are just nuanced. Is it a Shabbos Sunday case where one baby is Shabbos, one baby Sunday, or Friday Shabbos? So just we'll have to just hold cup a little bit. We're right at the opening of the Gemara, about 12 lines down. Kuf Lamed Zayin. Let's go and see version number 1. Rav Huna Masnei Chayev, Rav Yehuda Masnei Pater. So let's see how they understood our Mishnah. What did it mean when Rav Huna said Chayev and Rav Yehuda said Pater? Rav Huna Masnei Chayev, the Tanya, the Brisa writes, Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar, lo nechluku Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Eliezer now in our Mishnah, who, according to the text of our Mishnah, seem to be arguing about a case of the baby who was really a Friday bris and was circumcised on Shabbos. Here, what do we see? Lo nechluku Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, al mishahayilosh beis tinokos echalamul b'Shabbos ve'echalamul achar haShabbos. So he changes our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says the machlokas was where the bris was an erev Shabbos baby was done on Shabbos. And in the ratio, there was no machlokas in regards to Sunday. Sorry, that is our Mishnah. This first case is our Mishnah, where there's no machlokas in regards to Sunday. B'shachach umalas shel achar Shabbos. B'Shabbos, the Sunday bris was done on Shabbos. Shuchayv, everyone agrees. Alman nechlaku. What does Rav Shimon ben Elazar read our Mishnah as? Al misha hayulo beis tinokos echel mo be'erev Shabbos, be'echel mo b'Shabbos, v'shachach u'mal shal erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, where the baby was Friday bris and he was circumcised on Shabbos. There we have our machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatas, Rabbi Shua poter. So this really is in line with our Mishnah, and this Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is a support for the text that we have in our Mishnah. And what's the Mari Makomos here? Last of the short lines on this Amud, almost. Ushneim lo lamdu el me'avodas kochavim. Both the sheets of Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, they learned from the world of avodas kochavim. Rabbi Eliezer savar ka'avodas kochavim, that if you do a Friday bris on Shabbos, ma avodas kochavim amarachman lo savid v'chayavim mechayev. That if the Torah says don't do avodah zarah and you do it, you're going to be chayev. Hachanami lo shna. Here too is the case as well. You're not allowed to do a Friday bris on Shabbos. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah says that you're chayev if you do a Friday bris on Shabbos. Rabbi Yeshua argues and says, no, hasam delav mitzvah, hacha mitzvah. No, by avodah zarah, there was no mitzvah involved. Here, l'chol hapachos, you were doing a mitzvah because it was a Friday bris. It should have been Friday. So when you did the bris on Shabbos, l'chol hapachos, you're doing a mitzvah. So fine, you're pater. So some of the Rishonim are bothered by this. The fact that it's a mitzvah doesn't make the ma'isa mutter. If the bris was supposed to be on a Tuesday and you did a bris on Shabbos, you still did something asur. Why would that not be an isur d'oraisa? What is the actual logic of Rabbi Yoshua to say that hacha mitzvah? So maybe it's possible that one could argue that this is a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. I'm not doing this because there's a malacha. I don't care about the malacha. I'm doing it because there's a mitzvah. And that's how Rabbi Yeshua could be explained to say that it's therefore pater aval asur. This is d'Rabbanan. I don't want to do a malacha. I want to do the mitzvah. You gave me a mitzvah to do. I'm a day late. I'm off. So I should. It's this is d'Rabbanan. But maybe that's how Rabbi Yeshua could be explained. And that was the end of version number 1, which very much aligned with the text of our Mishnah. Let's see version number 2, second of the widest lines toward the end. Rabbi Yehuda Masni Pater, what did he mean when he said that our Mishnah was Pater? The Tanya. The Brisa writes in the name of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rabbi Meir lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua al misha hayu lo beis tinokos. Where is there no machlokas? Our Mishnah said the machlokas was by an Erev Shabbos baby circumcised on Shabbos. Where is there no machlokas? Echad lamul be'erev Shabbos ve'echad lamul be'Shabbos v'shachach umal es shelo Eschel Erev Shabbos b'Shabbos shu pater. So he says, no, the obvious case is the Friday baby who was circumcised on Shabbos that everyone agrees you're pater, divergent from our Mishnah. According to the first version of the version 1.0 that we saw from Shimon ben Elazar, he was of the opinion that our Mishnah had a machlokes in the case of a Friday baby circumcised on Shabbos. This next opinion in the name of Rav Meir is that everyone agrees in that case you're pater, maybe because of the logic we already learned that you're doing a mitzvah. Alman nechleku, according to this approach by Rabbi Meir, where would the machlokas in our Mishnah be between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua? Alman nechleku al misha hayu lo beis tinokos echel mul achar Shabbos v'echel mul b'Shabbos, the case of a Shabbos baby and a Sunday baby, v'shachach umal shal achar Shabbos b'Shabbos, and you circumcised the Sunday baby on Shabbos. There's a machlokas. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatas, Rabbi Yoshua poter. So that this is very different from our Mishnah. Whereas our Mishnah and version 1.0 that we saw from Reb Shimon ben Elazar, is that who it was? Reb Shimon ben Elazar, that the machlokas in our Mishnah is about a case of a Friday baby. So version number 2, according to Rabbi Meir, is no, there is no machlokas about a Friday baby. The Friday baby circumcised on Shabbos is pater. The only machlokas is when the baby was a Sunday baby circumcised on Shabbos. And what's the Mari Makom? Ushnehem, 6 lines down on the widest lines. Ushnehem lo limdu al mei avodas kochavim. Rabbi Elazar savar ke avodas kochavim. They learn from avodas kochavim. What does Rabbi Eliezer hold? Ma avodas kochavim amar rachman lo saved b'chiyavim mechayev. Just like the Torah said by avodas kochavim, Hashem said you're not allowed to worship other idols, and if you do, you're obligated. Hachanami lo shna. Here too, when you do a Sunday bris on Shabbos, you'll be held accountable. What's Rabbi Yeshua's answer? How does he get out of it? It's a Sunday bris. So it's not. You can't even argue that there's a kosher bris anymore because it's the 7th day. So for sure, the bris is not kosher. So Rabbi Yeshua, in the previous iteration, in version 1.0, he argued that at least there's a mitzvah. So what's he going to say now? If according to Rabbi Meir, our Mishnah has a machlokas between between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua in a case of a Sunday bris done on Shabbos, how could Rabbi Yeshua say that it's mutter? So it answers the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. Rabbi Yeshua hasam lo tarid mitzvah, hacha tarid mitzvah. Thereby, avodas kochavim, I wasn't touching a mitzvah. I was only touching a surah d'oraisa. But here by bris milah, I'm in the sugya of a mitzvah. I'm being involved. Afal pi that the bris is not kosher, but my asek was a mitzvah. So that's also unique on this one. But maybe it's like it could be. I'm making this up. It could be that it's still a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, because my head was to do a mitzvah. Could be. But that's how we define Malach Hashem Tzricha L'Gufa. I'm not doing it for the purpose that was done in the Mishkan. The Malach Hashem, we dug a hole because we needed it all. I'm not cutting the foreskin off because I want the foreskin removed. I'm cutting it off because Hashem gave me a tzivui. So maybe we could, I don't know. We have to get into the Rishonim. But that's how Rabbi Yeshua would have to answer according to the approach of Rav Meir, who says that the machlokes is by a Sunday bris done on Shabbos. How would Rabbi Yeshua say pater? So this is the Gemara's answer, is that Hasan by avodah zarah lo tarid mitzvah. They're not even being osek in a mitzvah at all. But hacha tarid mitzvah. You're being involved in a mitzvah. Your question is better than my answer. Good question. And here's the third approach, version 3.0. Let's see how Rabbi Chia understood our Mishnah. Tani Rabbi Chia, Omer Haya Reb Meir, Omer Haya Reb Meir, Lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, al mi shehayu lo beis hinokos echalamu be'erev Shabbos ve'echalamu b'Shabbos. There's no machlokas about the Friday baby. And here, differently, we said before, it was pater b'shacha chumal es shel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos shu chayiv. Wow, this is totally different. One of the previous versions of our Mishnah is that if a person does a Friday bris on Shabbos, everyone agrees you're pater. So here we're saying everyone agrees you're chayiv. That's the pashtus case. That's where there's no machlokas. Alma nechleku, where would our Mishnah, within the realm of Reb Chia, according to Reb Meir, what would then be the machlokas of our Mishnah? Al mishahayu lo beis tinokos echal molachar Shabbos v'echal b'Shabbos. You have a baby whose bris should be Sunday and a baby whose bris should be Monday, Shabbos. V'shacha chumal shel achar Shabbos b'Shabbos, and you circumcise the Sunday baby on Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatas, Rabbi Yeshua poter. So the Gemara here is very, very bothered. And here's why the Gemara is bothered. Let's look at what happened in this version. According to the approach of this version, if you do a bris on a baby who's a Friday baby, and you do the bris on Shabbos, according to this version, everyone holds your chayiv. And yet, if you do a Sunday bris on Shabbos, Rabbi Yeshua is matir. He says you're pater. So asks the Gemara, that's craziness. The Gemara says, Hashta Rabbi Yeshua Seifa, to lo ka'avid mitzvah, pater. By the end of the Mishnah, where there's a machlokes, in the case of a Sunday baby whose bris was on Shabbos, where there's no mitzvah, there Rabbi Yeshua says pater. But reisha de ka'avid mitzvah mechayev, but in the beginning of the Mishnah, where it was really a Friday baby being circumcised on Shabbos, you're chayev? How is that possible? Rabbi Yeshua makes no sense. So answers the Gemara, Amrei debei Rav Yana, your question is so good we have to change the case. What was the Reisha? What was the case, according to Reb Chia, in the name of Reb Meir, where we said that everyone agrees that you're chayiv? Reisha is kigon shekadam umal shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos. We're flipping the case. We said that it was two babies. One was erev Shabbos and one was Shabbos, and we didn't say which one had the bris done. So now we're saying the bris was the Shabbos baby done on Friday. And when that Shabbos baby is done on Friday, then he says that in that case, that's a case where you might have a chiyuv. So that's one way to get out of the answer, according to him. What? Yes. Amid Rav Yana Reisha Kigon Shekadam Umal Shel Shabbos the Erev Shabbos to Lo Nitna Shabbos Lidchos. Yes, that's correct. You did the Shabbos baby on Friday. Wait, why are you chayiv in that case? It's a nothing. Yeah. But why are you? Seifa deloka abid mitzvah. Hold on one second. Oh, I'm reading the wrong part here. 1 second. Amid Rav Yanai. Reisha, what was the first part of the case? Kegon shekadam umal shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos. Yeah, you might, and yes, and then delo nitna Shabbos lidchos. And under those circumstances, then that baby was not shaykh to Shabbos at all. And seifa nitna Shabbos lidchos. At least in theory, in the seifa, it was in theory possible that a baby could have been circumcised, just that he made a mistake. So one's shaykh by Shabbos and one's not. So Amar le Rav Ashi, the Rav Kahana, Reisha Nami, Nitna Shabbos Lidchos Lagabe Tinokos Te'alma. In theory, babies in general do get circumcised on Shabbos. We should have said at least there's some shaykhos. Says the Gemara, that's way too general. It's not shaykh to this particular person, and therefore it's not comparable. So that's how the Gemara's three versions, a lot of different iterations on our Gemara. We basically hold of the opinion like the middle approach. We hold like the Shita of Rav Meir, the first version, that there's no machlokes in regards to an Erev Shabbos bris done on Shabbos that you're pater, and that if someone does a Sunday bris on Shabbos, you're also pater like Rabbi Yeshua. That's how the Rambam passes it. Let's start a new Mishnah. The Mishnah writes, here are all of the lichatchila days that a person can be circumcised. Katan, Nimo, when are the days when a katan can have a bris? The Shmona on the 8th day, the Tisha, the 9th, La Asara on the 10th, La Achadasar on the 11th, Ula Shnemasar, and on the 12th. Lo Pachos, Lo Yoser, we can never do it earlier, and Lechatchila, we could never do it later. Of course, B'di'evet, you can always do a bris after the 8th day, assuming that someone needs a circumcision, that's for sure. Today, I got a call from someone if I could go to Champaign-Urbana on Monday to do a circumcision. I said, sure, no problem. And the family said, no, we only want, I was the second mole they were calling. They called my Rabbi to do the bris, Rabbi Ravinsky. So they said, we want you to do the bris. We're not using anybody else. We're doing the bris on Tuesday. How far do you push? Like they didn't want to use anybody else. So he tried, he pushed. He said, you're not doing the right thing. The bris, and he said it nicely, but the bris should be on day 8. You can use Phil. It's a competent mole. You should use him. And they wouldn't hear of anything else other than him. So Rabbi first paskins this way too, that when you're concerned that they'll otherwise not use it for a mole, just push off the bris a day to make sure that at least it's a kosher bris. But lechatchila, this is the Mishnah. Lechatchila, we have to make sure that we are doing a bris on either 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. And the Mishnah is now going to delineate exactly how that is. How do all these cases work out? How ketzad, kedar kol l'shmona, a regular baby, day 8, and that's lechatchila. Nolad lebein hashmashos, let's say a baby is born on Tuesday, 10 minutes after Shkia. So then we don't do the bris next Tuesday. We do it on what would be theoretically, it's not necessarily day 9, it's a suffix day 8, day 9, but we're going to call it day 9 for the Mishnah. That would be day 9, that's Latisha. Bein hashmashos shel erev Shabbos. What if it's an erev Shabbos going into, so it's 10 minutes after Shkia on Friday afternoon. There we push off, can't do it Saturday morning because it's a milah shelo bizmana. So then we push off the bris to Sunday, and that is a case of bein hashmashos shel erev Shabbos, that's nimula asara. What about Yom Tov la'achar haShabbos? If you have a day of Yontif that applies after Shabbos, and the baby was born Friday after Shkia, we can't do Shabbos morning, we can't do Sunday because it's Yontif, we do Monday. And what is that? Says the Gemara, that's La'achadasar. What country must we be in? We must be in Eretz Yisrael. It's only one day of Yontif. No. Wait till the next case. Shnei Yamim shel Rosh Hashanah, Nimo l'shnei masar. So then if you have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah following Shabbos, so then Shabbos is 9, can't do that. Sunday is 10 and Monday is 11. Can't do any of those because it's Rosh Hashanah. Why'd they pick Rosh Hashanah? Because Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara says, is a Yom Arichta. No matter where you live, it's always going to be considered 2 days. So therefore, that would be a scenario where the bris would be on day 12, lechatchila. So some of the Rishonim wanted to point out from here, and it's very difficult to understand, that the Haraya, you're allowed to do a bris on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galius. Why? Because the Mishnah picked the example of Rosh Hashanah. Why'd you pick Rosh Hashanah, which is a Yom HaRichta? You should have picked a regular Yom Tov if you wanted to make it more inclusive. But on the flip side, maybe this whole Mishnah is talking about Eretz Yisrael to start with, where there is no Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, because when the Mishnah said Yom Tov, it only applied 1 day of Yom Tov, because it said in that case, if the baby was born Erev Shabbos, and then it went from Shabbos into 1 day of Yom Tov, the bris would be on day 11. Right, that it's only 1 day of Yom Tov. So very difficult to understand this Mishnah from the lens of the Rishonim, because some felt that this was a Raya Berura, this was Eretz Yisrael. And the only sample that Eretz Yisrael has of a 2 day Yom Tov is Rosh Hashanah. Your question?
Shabbos is usually more likely to happen after Shabbos. So
no, it's a theoretical answer. I don't even know if can Rosh Hashanah fall on a Sunday? I have no idea. There's an acronym. What? There's an acronym, but that's what? That was what it was. Lo adu rosh. So it couldn't happen, but it's a theoretical possibility. This is not the first time we've seen this. Where what's that?
No, because the baby will be born on Wednesday night, just the first.
Correct. No, he's saying if Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday, meaning Wednesday night into Shkia.
The baby was born previous Thursday during
the baby's born a Wednesday night during Shkia, right. And the next week the bris would have been Thursday, but that day is the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Right. So then that day is going to be day 9, right. And then Friday is day 10, and Shabbos is day 11. The bris is day 12. So Rosh Hashanah, whatever the 2 day Yom Tov, it's always going to play out that way. But yes, the Gemara, that's a kasha. Why didn't the Gemara frame it as you did? That's also why didn't the Mishnah frame it that way? What? Oh yeah, my nephew was like that. Not my niece. My nephew was like that. I did a bris for my nephew. He was born such that the baby would have fallen out besuffic on the next day, which was the first day of Yom Tov. It was a 2 day Yom Tov. I think it was Shabbos. I don't remember. So we pushed it off 2 days. The bris was on day 11. Yeah, this is Ladina, absolutely. But there is a discussion about Yom Tov Sheni in the poskim, like even by other areas in Maseches. I think in Moed Katan there's a discussion you can do burials on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, because there's a mitzvah to make sure that a person gets buried. Mitzvah d'oraisa to bury people. And has a kadimus over a din that's a din d'Rabbanan. At the same time, we know that we don't wear tefillin on a Yom Tov Sheni. Afal pi that in Eretz Yisrael everybody's wearing tefillin. So the Chachamim had the power to be ma'akar davar minator b'sheva al tasa. That you're allowed to uproot dinei d'oraisa by doing nothing. You're not actively doing anything. You're just passively. I'm not putting on tefillin today. That's wild power for the Chachamim. So maybe that same lumdus would also apply in regards to the mitzvah of kavur. Could be. So in America, nobody buries anyone on Yom Tov Sheni. That's for sure. But that's because we have a cooling system. What about back in the day when they didn't have a cooling system? So maybe Taka they did. That's a possibility. Okay, so the Mishnah here is going to end off with a din that has nothing to, one last din here that has nothing to do with anything in regards to the timing of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But katan hachole, God forbid if there's a baby who's sick, then we do push off the bris. Ein mohaleno so ad sheyavri, we wait until the baby heals. Amar Shmuel, what does that mean? What about the healing part? Chalatz tochama, if he has a fever, so then nosnin lo kol shiva lahavroso. We wait a full set of 7 days from whenever the fever breaks. We wait a full 7 days. This is Ladina as well. If a baby has a systemic illness, the bris gets pushed off a full 7 days. How do we count? Let's see what the Gemara has to say about that. 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara asks a question. Now, normally when a baby is born, if the baby is born on Tuesday afternoon, 2 minutes before Shkia, so then that Tuesday is considered day 1 of the count. We don't wait until 2 minutes before Shkia on the next Tuesday to do the bris. The whole day, the whole day we chapter on that whole day, so that's day 1. You can do the bris as early as you want on that next Tuesday, even prior to the time of birth on that next Tuesday. But when a baby is sick, do we say that we wait a full week, 7 units of me'es la'es of 24 hours? Or do we say no, just like we would by a bris, it's just mixas hayom kekulo? How do we count those 7 days? Says the Gemara Tashma. Let's see the Tani Luda. Some held Yom Havra'aso ki Yom Hulado. The day that he becomes healed is like the day he was born. My love, doesn't that imply my Yom Hulado lo ba'inan me'es la'es? Just like as the example I gave, if a baby's born late on a Tuesday afternoon, the bris can still be earlier than that time on the next Tuesday on day 8. There's no me'es la'es there. Then maybe af yom havra'asa lo ba'inan me'es la'es. And so when a baby's sick, we also wouldn't require it. Answers the Gemara, lo, we don't agree with that opinion. Adif yom havra'asa. That day has a different day. It has a different power to it. Mi yom hulado. Yom hulado, in regards to the day of the birth, lo ba'inan me'es la'es. V'ilu yom havra'asa ba'inan me'es la'es. That when a baby is born, that whole day is mixas hayom kekulo. If his birth time on that birth certificate is 1 minute before Shkia, you can do on a Tuesday. So he's born at 8:05, whatever time Shkia, 8:15 on right before Shkia on a Tuesday. The bris could be at Netzachama the next Tuesday. We don't care. We don't have to match up the times. We paskin this way, that when a baby has a systemic illness and then he's finally healed, we have to look at a clock. We ask, when did the doctors say that he is now has a clean bill of health? And then we start ticking away. And it has to be 7 full units of 24 hours. And then the bris can't be before that time the next week. So I had this case a few weeks ago. A baby was a cholakoku. He couldn't have a bris on time. And he got a clean bill of health at 10 a.m. on a particular morning. But the family wanted to do an early bris. I'm like, I'm sorry, you can't do the bris. Let me just call Rabbi first. We'll talk it out. So Rabbi first said that you could do the whole morning. I'm like, what happened to the me'es la'es? It's mamash din in the Gemara. And that's how the Gemara is done now. We conclude now. We're at a new Mishnah. So he said, hospitals are just covering their liability. He's like, it could have been many hours ago. So he's like, 10 a.m. is the whole morning already. So that was already, still, you need to be a big posting for that because it's usher to do a bris early. It's not usher in the same way that it would be before day 8, but we have a din. The din is that you wait 7 full days, 7 24-hour units. So that's how we pass it. The most difficult part of all of this is defining what is a real illness. Billy Rubin's not, a cough and a cold is not. That's a little hard to define. Almost every case requires psak from a posek. Let's continue. New Mishnah, bottom of Kuflam and Zayin, Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Eluhain mitzitzin da hama'ak v'nes hamila. Remember, we learned about this. There are some adhesions from the inner lining of the foreskin called the mucosal lining or the or hapriya that sometimes get stuck on the anatomy. And how do we define that? Answers the Mishnah. Basar hachofe es rov ha'atara. If there is basar, the flesh, this inner lining of foreskin, hachofe, that covers rov ha'atara. If it covers the majority of the crown, the glands, then we are in a circumstance where the bris is not yet kosher, and so much so, the eino ochel truma, b'truma, he's not allowed to eat truma. He's an arel, he's not allowed to eat truma. So adds the Mishnah, v'imhoya bal basar, if the baby is a super fat baby, some babies are just laid out that way, they collect a lot of fat in the pubic area. So then, writes the Mishnah, you should cut a little bit extra. That's not necessarily medically recommended. because when a baby is very pudgy, and therefore it pushes up all the skin on the anatomy, you should always remove the normal amount of skin. Because when the kid thins out, it's going to pull back all that skin to its original place. So sometimes when babies are super fat, I warn the parents in advance that after the bris, it's going to look like there's still some skin on the crown. I can assure you the appropriate amount of skin was removed. When he thins out and I show them the pubic fat, they have no idea what I'm talking about. But it doesn't make a difference because I have to make sure that I'm removing the right amount. Because if you take off too much, and then you take off too much skin to make it look like he's mahul now, but he's a super fat baby, then when he gets older, the anatomy is going to be restricted during a kishui, and that's very painful and limiting in other ways as well. So this has to be done with caution. This mitakno means it has to be done in a way. Rashi here writes about this. Whatever. You have to be very careful, as of practically speaking, about how much you remove, because otherwise it could cause for problems down the road. Turning to the top of Kuf Lamed Zayin and Beis, finishes off the Mishnah, Mal velo para, es amila ki'ilu lo mal. Someone who does a mila and they leave the or hapriya, they don't peel the back, that's not a kosher mila. It can happen, actually, that when you're doing a bris, that the foreskin can split in half. And then when you do the bris, you only remove the outer layer, and the inner layer can perfectly stay in place. Very uncommon. It's happened to me once in, 1,300 babies, very uncommon. But when it happens, you have to go back and remove the or hapriya, otherwise the bris is not kosher, and it doesn't look good, and some other side effects that are not good. So that's what this Mishnah is referring to from a halachic frame, that it is not considered a kosher mila. It is as if he was not circumcised if the or hapriya is left in its place. Opens the Gemara. Amar Rav Avina, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Bar Abba, Amar Rav. Find me the language and the difference in language here. Basar hachofes rov govho shel atar. Sounds almost exactly like our Mishnah with one added word, govha, the height. That's a very big difference, because havamina that it could have been the circumference, maybe the lower half of the crown, but the majority of it was covered in the circumferential way. That's not li'ikuba. We're only talking about the height of the anatomy, the height of the glands. And when you see that, then it's ma'akev esamila. Very important additional word by the Gemara. The imhaya bal basar Amar Shmuel says katan hamisur bal basar. If there is a baby that has a lot of flesh, that a baby that's a very fat baby, roano. So how do we assess his mila? When the baby has an erection and it still appears that he looks like he's circumcised, that's considered the threshold, the minimal threshold that the bris should be kosher, being lav. And if when the baby has a kishui, it doesn't look like he's mahul, so then tzarech lamul. So there are clinical cases where babies are so significant, they have such a significant fat pad, they'll actually have a surgery in order to staple down the anatomy in such a way where the aver will protrude, because otherwise they could be such significantly fat babies that it almost looks like they have no aver, just swallowed in pubic fat. It's clinical case. It's called buried penis. It's a real thing. So when babies are very fat and they don't lose weight when they're 2-3 years old when they start walking, that's a procedure that urologists would consider. And there are some halachic challenges, but again, you have to be super careful about doing secondary cuts in that case, because you could easily remove too much as well. So that was version number one, that if you are able to see, this was written in the positive, and then b'masnisa tana, that was from the times of the Amoraim. Here we have something from Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and he was Omer. He said, "Katan meshurba babasar," a baby who is a fatter baby. Roano. So how do we assess him? Kolzman shemis kashe. The Eino Niramal said in the negative, if he didn't appear mal tzarach lamulo, and if he did appear mahal, then ein tzarach lamulo, just flipped language. But my beinayu, there's a slight difference between the two shitas. Ika beinayu, the difference is nira ve'eino nira. When it's on the line, there's a difference. The difference between the two shitas would be that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel would have been of the opinion that he does not need a bris, and the Shmuel would have said that he would have needed a bris. Next, mal velo para, if one leaves over the or hapriya, if one leaves over the inner lining, the mucosa lining, tanu rabbanon, this has nothing to do with that. I don't know why the Mishnah jumped off of this part, why the Gemara jumps off of this part of the Mishnah from here until the end of the parak is just the brachos of mila. Tanu rabbanon hamal, the person who does the mila itself, Omer, he says, Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav tzivanu al hamila. So that's what I would say as a moel. And then Avia ben Omer Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav l'achnis b'riso shel Avram Avinu. If a father is doing the cutting also, and I as the mole set everything up, he makes both brachos. Because the mitzvah is on the chaticha, it's not on the setup. The mitzvah is just the removal of the skin. It's very rare that I've allowed that to happen, but when a father does that, he would make both of the brachos. Ha'omdim, people in the room, after the bracha of the father, everybody says, Omrim, kishem shenichnas labris, ken yikanis asor l'chupa l'maisim tovim. Omer, and then afterwards, when we make the brachos, what bracha do we make? We make the bracha b'ashir kidashidi mi beten chok b'sheirosam. It says, "Oh chasam b'os bris kodesh al ken b'scharzos kel chai chelkenu tzirenu It's missing the word Tzarenu. Tziva or Tzaveh, Machlokes, Art Scroll, and Koren. Take a look. There's different girsaos, all based on these Mari Makomos here. That goes with Tzionim, writes Tziva. Other Mari Makomos write Tzaveh. Lahatzil Yididu Sheirenu Mishachas, to save the Jewish people from destruction. Laman Briso Asher Sam B'Yisrael Bracha to Hashem Korei Sabris. And that's the bracha that is the bracha that we make now as well. Next case. Hamalas Hagerim, someone who circumcises a person who's converting. Omer, the bracha is Baruch to Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvosav Etzivanu Al Hamila. That's the same bracha we make by a Jewish baby too. There are others who have a different bracha. Lamulas Hagerim. I had a shiloh that I brought to Rabbi Dov Schwartzleiter, should live and be well, about someone who called me to do a bris. I've known him my whole life, Kima. I thought he was Jewish, and I thought his wife was Jewish. I just assumed he was Jewish. I asked, and he said yes. And then one of the uncles called me and said, really, you don't know this, but the mother of the mother did a conservative conversion in the 60s, and we have no idea if she's actually Jewish. So I called Rabbi Dov Schwartz. I told him as much as I knew, and he said that because the uncle's from, so there's every chance that this baby is going to end up actually getting into a mikvah when he's older, because the uncle was a bit of a kana. He was for sure going to tell him. So he said, you're allowed to do a milah with a bracha, a milah shel gerus, with the bracha of al hamila of this bracha, even though it's not the normal bracha that we normally make by a ger, but here he allowed me to make this bracha so that there was no busha for the family. I could still make the bracha of al hamila, not to say the bracha amula sagerim, which would have caused for a lot of family politics. So he was makil to allow.
Never had a bris?
Who?
Bris is from guy.
He was. His wife was the one whose mother converted. He's Jewish. His wife was not. That was the question mark. Yeah. He had a bris. I mean, I didn't ask him. I just assumed he had a bris. Yeah, but he wasn't the Shiloh. The mother was. So I never spoke to the mother about it at all. The uncle called me privately behind the scenes. I brought the Shiloh to Rabbi Schwartz because he heard that I was the Moel, and then he wanted to save me from making a bracha levatala. The baby's a goy, you can't make a bracha. And if it's a safek gerus, you also don't make a bracha. So then I'm a safek gerus, I do all the time. That's I just say l'shem milas gerus. But in this case, I wasn't sure. I was a little hard to. I was uncomfortable with the whole thing because this is a guy I grew up with. He knew about his wife's status, but I didn't know. And what am I going to walk in there and not make a bracha? Like he went to Orthodox, he knows if you're making a bracha or not. It's very awkward. I could not have been happier when Rabbi died. I'm like, thank you so much. I want to hang up before we finish talking. Call to Rabbi, thank you so much. And I got my head right. It was like running away. I was just pressurizing. But in the end, I don't know what happened. He's still a baby, still a couple of years old at this point. But Rabbi Schwartz said that because there's a likely chance that maybe he'll jump in the mikvah when he's older, then the gerus is a real gerus and you can make a bracha. So what is the secondary bracha that's made at a gerus bris? The Hamavarech, the one who makes the bracha afterwards, Omer Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvosav Etzivanu Lamulas Hagerim Ulahatif Mehem Dam Bris Shel Male Dam Bris Lo Niskaimu Shamayim Va'aretz Shenemar Im Lo Brisi Yomam V'Layla Chuko Shamayim Va'aretz Asher Lo Samti Baruch Atah Hashem Koreis Habris. That's the whole bracha that we need to have at Tafas Dam Bris Shel Male Dam Bris, like the bracha said, that there would be no Shamayim Va'aretz, and the Dam Bris itself is critical. Last case before we wrap up for the evening, Hamal Es Ha'avadim. Back in the day when a person would have an eved, they would have to give the eved a bris. Omer, Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvosav Etzivanu Al Hamila. Seemingly a bracha that crosses all bounds. Yes? Sure. He needs to have kavanah. He needs to know what he's doing. The uncle's going to tell him. The uncle's a real kanai. He's going to tell him. If he hasn't told him at the age of 2, he'll tell him soon. He's gonna shove it down his throat until he gets in the mikvah.
I heard from someone that everyone at some point in their life, when they go to the mikvah, should do l'shem gerus, just in case.
Considering the Yeridas Hadoros, there are crazier things out there. There are crazier. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva like that about how can a child ever be born a ben nida, like let's say that a woman doesn't keep Taras HaMishpacha. So if a child comes out without the midos of a ben nida, which the Gemara lists 9 terrible midos of a ben nida, if they come out good, Rav Moshe Feinstein is Melamed Zchus. She must have gone to the beach in a loose enough fitting bathing suit, and she went into the water and she was totally dunked, and there were no chatzitzas, and then there were wild ideas. So things along those lines. Yeah. I did a bris for someone a few weeks ago, and she said that she was told by Rabbi Reese to do a tefillah, a suffer saveg, geras l'chumrah is what they call it. She did a geras l'chumrah. Very, very difficult. These are the worst phone calls to get. I just finished my conversion with Rabbi Karen, whoever, and I want you to do my son's bris. Okay, what's the bracha we make after the Eved is circumcised? V'hamavarech, Omer Asher Kedushanim b'mitzvosav l'mulas ha'avadim u'latif me'em dambris shel malei dambris chukos shamayim va'aretz lo niskaimu she'nemarim lo brisi yomam v'layla chukos shamayim va'aretz l'santi bracha to Hashem koris habris. The same bracha, similar bracha, I should say, with the change of the ger to the change of avadim, but the same bracha. This is also ladina. This is not by the Eved, but by the ger. By the ger, if you do a real proper gerus, then you make a different bracha afterward. You don't make the bracha Bashir Kidash Yid Mi Beten, because he's not a yid. He's not a yid fully. Because in order to be a yid fully, you need all three steps of, well, really two in your baby, because you can't do a Kabbalah mitzvos until you're older. That's a big discussion. If a child turns 13, do you have to give him an option to be from? Because the Kabbalah mitzvos is the ikr. That's really the thorn in the side of all other forms of gerus, which is that if someone says, I was a Kabbalah mitzvos, I decided I'm not going to eat treif anymore. Okay, but you're machal Shabbos b'farhesia. You don't follow the hilchos nida. And heichan hayad magas. And then at the same time, let's talk on the flip side. Let's say that you have someone who is fully well intended to be from. They just fall off the path after they became Jewish. Well, I have a student like this. She was a goy, Toresa, a goya. She went through the process of conversion. She did this with the Aguda of Illinois under Rabbi first, and I taught her hilchos Shabbos and from and got married and then totally dropped everything. So then is there like this lemafreya retroactive regression in her Jewish status? Probably not. Once you're granted a neshama, there's no un-Jewishing yourself, right? So the chorus, she's Jewish, so then it's just not so simple. But when there's a conservative or conservative conversion or a reform conversion, reform conversions are not difficult. Those are usually pretty simple to pass out. But the reform conversions, when the rabbanim were from the previous door, those are really when things get very, very difficult, because a lot of those rabbis were Orthodox. So then you have to look into who the dayanim were, her to paskin on. All these shilohs go straight to rabbanim. No, these are not for me or you, or they go straight to Rabbi first, whoever, somebody far, far, far bigger than I and me and you. All right, everyone. Oh, let's do that. That's good. Hadron Allah Rabbi Lazar Demila. Hadron Allah Rabbi Lazar Demila. Hadron Allah Rabbi Lazar Demila. You wrote we should come back to this page in 7.5 years.